We're going to dive into system software in this chapter. We're going to cover everything from standalone operating system to system server and the components that are in most operating systems. We're going to dive into system software in this chapter. We're going to cover everything from standalone operating system to system server and the components that are in most operating systems. We're going to dive into system software in this chapter. We're going to cover everything from standalone operating system to system server and the components that are in most operating systems. System software can be divided up in two areas. You have your operating system that controls your services and programs in your computer. Then you have your utility devices or your utility software that helps you do extra stuff that aren't really required, but they make your life a lot easier. Some examples we'll talk about later, but like a system update or a defrag or a security or an encryption or formatting or even virus softwares. Those are kind of extras, so we consider them utilities. Before we dive into the inner code of operating system and system software, let's talk about some things, some basic things you can always do. If your computer's acting up, always shut it down or restart. But I like to shut down. That is called a cold boot. Warm boot is just to restart it. I have a whole bunch of kids, and one of them is at college away, and so when she's in the dorm, she calls me and says, "Hey, my computer's not working, Dad. What do I do?" And I always say, "Restart it." And she gives me the sigh. And guess what? She never calls back. But that's the first thing I always say. So it's kind of like an aspirin for a computer. If your machine's just not acting normal, it's doing funky things, shut it down, cold boot it, let it sit there, count for a little bit. Give it a minute. Turn it back on. A lot of times that'll cure your problems. Again, if you just hit the restart button, that's called a warm boot. Another thing to consider when you're getting ready to turn your computer on or install new software, OS software, you should always figure out where your bootable disk is, and usually you'll have directions on how to do it, but your computer comes ready. Let's say you buy it from Dell or HP or Toshiba, and it comes, and it knows to boot off your C drive. Well, that was set up before, and your operating system can make some decisions off that, but you can also make a boot disk. So if you have like a system crash or you have a virus real bad, or you can boot off of a disk and you can create it. Each operating system is a little different. Look at yours and figure it out, and you can find directions by Googling it. But basically what will happen is if that disk is in there, or that CD-ROM or that USB or whatever, it'll boot off that, okay, and you can change it. I always recommend doing a recovery disk. In general, basically, that's a way to get back to the original settings. A lot of times, if you buy it through Dell, you'll see a CD come. And even sometimes they'll partition your hard drive. So if you ever call tech support, you don't know it, but they hold some of your hard drive that you can't see, and they put a recovery drive, not to get your stuff back, but to restore it back to the original set when they send it to you. Before we break down and look at some OSs, we still have to have some terminology. There's user interface controls. Basically, it's the click screen. It's the instructions on how the information is displayed. We use Google, we use graphical interface, user interface, which is GUI. Basically, next slide, you'll see a line interface, which is very hard and you had to memorize everything, but we just click on things and we can interact through menus and visuals, and we call things desktop and active control bars, and we can do a lot of neat things by using graphics. This is fairly new within the last 25 years, 30 years. I gotta make sure I'm not, I'm older than what I think sometimes. But in the olden days, you'll see the next slide, we used a line interface. So GUI is a big term that you should be familiar with. Graphical User Interface. Here we go, we're back into the dark ages. This is a line interface or command line interface. And if you go into your start menu or your Windows and type in CMD, the little window will pop up and you can get back in the old command line interface mode. This is how we used to have to work on our computers. You had to memorize every line, every interface, every command. There were no drop-down menus or icons to double-click on. It was just all in your brains, and I think basically that kind of scared a lot of people away, and it slowed the adoption of technology in the business world. Now we put our GUI interface, your Windows or your Mac operating system on your computer, but now what does it do? First off, it manages your memory. It essentially, basically, where your memory is going, how fast, it allocates proportions of it. When it's not used any longer, it flushes it out. Okay, so that's one big, no matter what platform you're on, that's one of the big assets or uses or tools that operating systems accomplish. Also, your virtual memory is a feature, the operating system that allows you to, in a computer, if you run short on memory, it's kind of like writing a hot check. Where in the old days, your check wasn't cashed for a couple of days. So you knew you'd get paid and you'd write a check 2 days before you got paid, knowing that the shopping store wouldn't cash it yet. But nowadays it's all instant. But virtual memory is the same things where you're borrowing memory from your hard drive. So you don't have enough memory, a physical RAM on your motherboard. So what you're doing is your operating system is borrowing extra space, virtual memory, from your hard drive. The bummer is if you don't have a lot of hard drive space, you're going to have problems. Other things that the operating system does, it determines the order of which things are processed. It helps, the memory goes into memory and the processor is going to eat it up, which we've learned in earlier chapters. But what is allocated and how it's done is dictated by the operating system. Also, another thing is a driver is, it's a small program that helps peripherals work. It specifies how the operating system is going to communicate with it. It kind of manages it. It helps with the plug and play. It automatically configures devices. It establishes an internet connection, which is big. I think that's a test question. Since Windows 95, operating systems, by the meaning of the definition, help establish an internet connection. You just hit your internet and it's on. Okay, it's not Comcast, but it basically works between your internet provider, ISP, and your operating system. And number 5 down there, it lists it has a performance monitor, and basically it looks at what's going on. It gives you reports. If you go into your accessories on your desktop, you can see all these things, and it'll give you'll know. Usually, if I suspect that I have malware or a virus, you can go in to your tools and look at some of the system tools, and you can see, wow, look at my internet connection is going crazy. It's 100% usage, and I'm not even on the internet. That means somebody is. Okay, you can also look at your processor. If it's just spinning, and you're not doing anything, got some issues. So another thing that the operating system does, it helps monitor your performance of your computer. Some things that you see every day or could see every day that operating systems provide you with is managing your files, being able to move it into one folder or another through your graphical user interface, or what we call GUI. Excuse me. You can search for files. You can view images, those pop-up screens, which we'll cover a little bit. You can secure your programs on the computer. You can basically uninstall programs using your OS. clean up your disk, defrag it, which I'll tell you a little bit later what that means. You can diagnose problems, you can back up disks, you can do a lot of things that your operating system provides for you. I purposely have the icon small down there because there's such an argument out there, which is the best operating system. Whatever feels comfortable for you. Okay, standalone operating systems provide a lot of a lot of things for you, a lot of tools that you can utilize. Everything from an internet connection. So you don't need a server software, which will be the next couple of slides we're talking about, where they manage the whole network. But you can have a standalone, buy a computer, a laptop from Dell. It can ship today, and you still can connect with other people using one of the Windows. You know, you've got Linux, you've got Mac OS. There's a lot of software, and there's some other operating systems that I'm not giving credit to. So if you're using them, I apologize. But we're going to be talking now basically about the standalone operating system, you know, the things that we take passion about. If you're a Mac user, you know, you're crazy about it. If you're a Windows user and you've been a long time, you're crazy about it. All I can say is learn to use both. You'll never know. You don't want to turn down a job opportunity. I've seen students do this. They like, I can only work on a Mac, so I can't take the job, or I can only work on a Windows. Don't be an OS snob. Learn them both. They're both have their pluses and their minuses. So we're going to dive a little bit into the standalone operating systems. Your embedded OSs, which, they could be a company can create their own OS that are like in sewing machines or even some of the car systems. Those are what we call embedded OS. Okay, therefore the function of that device, and it's specific to that device. They have a menu system. They have a lot of things that go on. But these are embedded. You really can't install them. They come with the device that you purchase. So that's how they get the terminology embedded operating system. Your mobile OSs that within the last 10 years have really come on strong. They basically could be an Android, a Windows, which seems to be dying out on the phone system, and you have your iOS, and even you have BlackBerry, which who knows where they're going to end up. They still have a lot of power within the industry. But these operating systems are kind of embedded because you really can't install them with a disk, but you can do updates through connections and through your data plan. Okay, they run everything that you can do on smartphones, on your mobile phones. They basically help you, again, connect to the internet. Okay, so they're just miniaturized operating systems that you used to have on your desktop. Operating systems for servers are a little different because servers are like regular computers on steroids. However, you're not going to use them for the everyday word processing or checking your email. What they're going to be specific for is for like checking security, making sure people are getting on the network properly, that they have a username and password. They're sharing information. They're sharing data. They can even have their own little miniaturized cloud system. I know at the college, our My Documents folder is really not on my computer. It's on the server that I log into. So it's a very robust, more memory, bigger CPU. It's on steroids. It's a regular computer on steroids, but you don't use it for every day. It's for network management. You're going to see that your print jobs, that when you hit print, it goes to a print spool. Let's say if you don't have a printer in your office, it goes to a print spool and we print down in the office. That is all managed through your server operating system, okay, which is a bigger computer. Now you see here a list of some of the stuff that come in an operating system, but we would declare them on the utility software side of the operating system because they're not needed to run every day. It's just a nice thing to have. It's like seat warmers in a car.